Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for the incredible tour. This is an amazing facility. Um, Let me start you off by asking, what are we trying to achieve with robotics as an industry, as an area of research, as an entrepreneurial venture? What is the end game for robotics?
Yeah, thanks so much for coming to visit. I'm glad you enjoyed driving Spot. Look, I think a company like ours exists because there's a giant labor shortage coming, right? Especially in North America, Europe, Japan, South Korea. Labor is becoming more and more scarce. Why? Because on the one hand, you have an aging population that is aging out. Sometimes people are retiring and taking knowledge with them that leaves the company. On the other hand, we have shrinking populations. And thirdly, we have changing work preferences. Right? After COVID, that got exaggerated. A lot of people left the workforce. Where they all went is a little bit unclear, but they're not there anymore. So at the highest level, Boston Dynamics exists because we think there's a giant labor shortage coming. And our robots can help automate some of these tasks that exist in the world today. And our vision is to create autonomous, general purpose robots. And to us, that means robots that can go anywhere that a human can go, robots that have a semantic understanding of their environment, and robots that can then ultimately manipulate the world around them.
It, I now know that you are, at Boston Dynamics at least, you're going for much more deployment and industrial-based stuff, but I think not until very long ago, there was also a lot of research focus. So I feel like the answer you gave me is the new answer that's been around for the last 3, 4, 5 years since COVID, where this labor shortage has come about. But there was also another angle to it, right? Am I wrong about that?
No, you're absolutely right. I always say we're a 30-year-old startup.
Right.
Because we're sitting in our museum at the moment, and you see the robots around you that are our history over the last 30 years. And you're right that for 25 years, we were a research company. So governments and industries came to us with specific problems and said, hey, can you build a prototype robot that addresses this particular issue? But about 5 years ago, we started to commercialize our innovations. And so we started with Spot, our quadruped robot for industrial inspection. And then 3 years ago, we started with Stretch, our logistics robot. And next year, of course, Atlas, our humanoid robot, is joining the commercialization journey. But you're absolutely right. We're a company that is in the teenage years of growing up and becoming a real commercial business.
Interesting. What I want to do through this conversation is sort of chase a central question, which is, what does it look like when robots and humans live together? What does the future look like in 10 years? What is the future of robotics overall? And so let me ask you this. What is the most beautiful thing you've seen a robot do?
The most beautiful thing that our robots currently do is keeping people out of harm's way. There's the old saying in robotics, robots make those tasks that are dull, dirty, and dangerous better. And so that's true for our robots as well. For example, take our logistics robot Stretch. Today, the application that we launched with is truck unloading. That's the most hated job in a warehouse. It is hot in the summer, it is cold in the winter, there's no windows, and it is literally back-breaking work. So people get hurt doing this job. And so if you can replace that particular task with a robot that does the unloading for you, it keeps people out of harm's way. For the Spot robot, our quadruped robot, we have sort of two major applications. The first application is teleoperating, remote controlling the robot into a dangerous situation. That could be a nuclear power plant, that could be a hostage situation in first responders, that could be a burning building, or it could be very cold or hot environments. So keeping people out of harm's way is also true with Spot. So we've been in a lot of first responder situations. We have about 20 robots in Fukushima in Japan, for example, where there's environments that are too dangerous for humans to be in.
And so, no, I understand the utility bit of it. I understand that the purpose of a lot of the stuff you're building will insulate humans from a lot of dangerous environments. But I mean this almost in a science fiction way, because is there something that a robot's done that's kind of surprised you, that it has that ability? I know you came into the company only in 2021, 2022, something around that time, right? And so when you were first exposed to robotics, and I'm pretty sure you're exposed to deeper stuff than what I see here or inside, is there something that surprises you with what ability we could harness with robots?
Yeah, you're right. We keep the sentient robots in the basement, but
Because that's where they should be.
no. Look, I think I understand. I understand the question.
Right.
One of the most beautiful things that I've certainly seen our robots do most recently is we were on America's Got Talent, which is a TV show in the United States where people show off crazy talents, and we were invited with our robots. So we danced on the show with 7 of our robots. And that was sort of a magical moment because it really exposed 20 million American viewers to robots in a way that is lighthearted and fun. And we do those things because we want to bring the general public along. We realize that not everybody loves robots the way that we do. So we do these dances and public appearances to sort of showcase robotics in the most positive way. And if you ask me personally, yes, you're right. I've been here about 5 years helping with our commercialization journey. And to me, the robots are as magical today as they were when I first started. So when you walk through our office and you see the robots walking around, it is still a magical experience on a daily basis.
No. Yeah, it kind of begs the question because I feel like the general public has to be acclimatized to robots being around them. And that's a major sort of physical barrier because even with the cars that self-drive themselves on the road, people have gotten pretty used to them, but at first there was a lot of shock to it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure if I'm sitting in the back of one of those, in the back of my head, it's still worried that this taxi, you know what I mean? There has to be a lot of trust deficit issues that you'll have to solve in the journey of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Am I right about that?
For sure. And many of our customers, we have a couple of thousand customers that have Spot robots today in industrial environments, and it takes some time, right? There is a change that needs to happen in the organization. A good example is our customer BMW drove the robot through the cafeteria at noon for a period of 6 weeks so that everybody could ask questions, everybody could take a selfie with the robot. And then once they realized that people were stopped taking selfies, then they knew, okay, now it's time to actually deploy the robot in an operational environment. So I think you got to bring the associates along and you got to tell them what the robot does and what the robot doesn't do.
From an industrial standpoint, I kind of understand sort the capabilities you have. I saw some of them and you're free to tell me more about them. But I want to understand also from just like a general purpose standpoint, what is already possible with robots and robotics?
Yeah,
Where are
that's
we at?
I think that's a fantastic question because there's a lot of hype in the media at the moment, and you see a lot of videos out there on YouTube about robots doing crazy stunts, and it sort of creates the impression that the robots can do more than they can do today. So that the state of the art is that robots can autonomously live in factories. You have wheeled robots, AMRs that live in factories. You have, of course, self-driving cars like Waymos that live in the real world and drive around. And we have our Spot robot that autonomously lives in lots of factories, lives with humans in those factories, can avoid obstacles, can avoid humans, can avoid different and changing situations. And I think that's an innovation that is probably only 3 years old, that it's easy to maintain autonomy in a known environment. It's very hard to maintain autonomy in an ever-changing, unstructured environment.
Say more about that. Like, help me understand what that means for an amateur.
Yeah. So you've seen robots in logistics facilities and warehouses that are on wheels, but many of them in the beginning phases drove on predefined routes. And those routes sometimes had induction coils in the ground so that the robot would follow a specific path. And if something changed, for example, if there was a forklift in the way, the robot would have to stop because the robot didn't know what to do in that situation. And today, our robots can, in fact, understand changing environments. So the robots create a map of their environment that they live in. And then if there's a forklift in the way, or there's a pallet on the ground, or there is a garbage can that wasn't there yesterday, the robot can look at its internal map and say, okay, I know I need to get to the other side of the warehouse, but all of a sudden there's a forklift here in the way. How else can I get there? And then the robot finds an alternative route. So that's an example of how these robots can live in quasi-unstructured environment where stuff can change on the robot and the robot can still navigate that environment.
Got it. And so the robot is mapping and computing its environment constantly, and it's doing it in a environment that might not be the same as it was the last moment, and so it has to account for dynamically and then figure out its movements. And largely it works on vision. I'm sure there's perception as a problem in the whole thing. I'm sure there is also dexterity as a problem in the whole thing. Can you explain a little bit to me what kind of scientific problems go into a basic robotic adventure?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You're asking a go-to-market person, so I can barely turn my laptop on and off, but I'll give you my high-level understanding of the situation. Remember when I said that we're trying to build general-purpose robots that can go anywhere, can understand their environment, and then can manipulate their environment. We have mastered the go anywhere. You've witnessed Spot inside going over gravel, going up and down stairs. That robot can now go anywhere that a human can go. Having a semantic understanding of the world means that the robot doesn't only understand the world as obstacles, but understands the world that how you and I understand the world. Meaning, the robot would look at something and say, that's a human, that's a forklift, that's a piece of machinery, and here's a scene of 5 humans sitting at a table. That has only become possible with the advances in AI over the last 3 years. So now the robot can take a picture, we can send it to a foundational model, and the foundational model returns with information that is useful for the robot. Should the robot sit on a table? No, the robot should not, right? Robots don't sit on tables. So all of a sudden, these robots have more of a semantic understanding of their environment, and that's super helpful for the next step, which is then, can these robots manipulate their environment the way that you and I can? And that's sort of where most of the robotics research for us, and I think for many other companies, currently goes into. So that we're building not large language models like Anthropic, ChatGPT, right? We're building large robotics models, models that understand our world with the physicalities that go along with it. So a large language model understands this is a Coca-Cola can, versus a large robotics model would understand how to manipulate that particular piece of that particular object. So I think it's those 3 things together, going anywhere that a human can go, understanding our environment and then manipulating our environment, that is sort of the dream of robotics. And that would allow us then, going back to your original question, to live with these robots in harmony.
I feel like those are kind of like the 2 broad intelligences that humans have. One of them is the ability to abstract, and so do math in space. I imagine a mathematical problem and then I do it in my head. That's pure abstraction. Words are a kind of example for that. Concepts and conceptuality and categories and all these ontological things, they're all part of this LLM sort of world where the LLMs can kind of make sense. And I was speaking to one of these CEOs more recently, and I was trying to understand, my central question with them was, does an LLM truly understand us? Because it's so hard to even ask what understanding might mean in that context. Robotics, on the other hand, are working with the physical world, where it's your spatial, it's your intelligence to manipulate objects and how they operate in a predefined framework that's been made for humans. For instance, if you want to open a door, it's been made for a hand that clasps.
Yeah.
And so it's a completely different problem set, but they seem to be 2 adjacent sides to the same intelligence. Something that comes embodied in the human form already. I can reason and I can move things. Both those things are true. Do you see it like that, or have I stretched it too far?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And that's where the large language model is maybe the reasoning part, and then sort of large behavioral models or language action models where you're translating that language into an action, right? Pick up the Coca-Cola can. You have to understand, what is a Coca-Cola can? Do I currently see one in my field of vision? And if I do see one, how heavy it is, how much force do I need to exert to pick up that object without crushing it? So those all are the elements that would go into a full large behavioral model for robotics, which is what so many companies are chasing right now.
Yeah, it sounds like for us, it's so intuitive. If I see a Coke can, I know I cannot crush it.
Yes.
And I know if I lift it with too much force, I'm going to jerk it upwards and it's all going to fall. So there is an intuitive sense of how hard must I activate my force around it. That has to be a fairly hard mathematical problem to put into code, would it not?
For sure,
Yeah.
and even think easier if you have a couple of coins in your pocket, and you have a car key, some coins, and a chewing gum in your pocket. You can put your hand in your pocket, and you will understand what's in your pocket.
Right.
And if I tell you, hey, only pull out the coins, you can do that. That is an unsolved robotics problem, and I don't think we really understand yet how humans can do all these things. And even an 8-year-old could do it, right? So there's some really hard unsolved challenges in there, both in terms of the reasoning as well as in the dexterity and the way that our hands can feel. So there's a couple of hard challenges still in there.
That is such an interesting idea to think about your skin as a sensor that informs, because I'm sure that is a problem that you cannot necessarily solve. Like your sensors probably work on some other kind of radar or visual or camera technology. But for humans, you can touch and know what it is, and that's such. Is there any more hard robotics problems like this which are so intuitive to humans that seem like hard to solve in your field?
I think the other big one, going back to your original question, what will it take for humans and robots to live in harmony, is certainly safety, right? If I see you and you start running towards me at full speed, I can sort of gauge how long it will take you to crash into me, and I can step aside. That remains a hard robotics challenge in terms of the reaction time, the vision. And so functional safety for humanoid robots hasn't fully been invented yet. It's something that we spend a lot of time on, because ultimately you want these robots to be cobots that live and work next to us. Today, our truck unloading robot, for example, which is a very heavy and very strong robot, because it needs the speed that is required in logistics, that is not a cobot, right? That robot has to work in a virtual cell where we create a LiDAR cell that if somebody walks through that cell, then the robot would stop. And so that's certainly a workaround, but in order for robots to be among us and live among us, we need better functional safety solutions than that.
Can we get a robot to catch a ball I throw from like 10 yards out?
Can you do what? Sorry, say one. Yeah.
Like a moving object.
Yeah.
Can a moving object be tracked, captured, and then caught by a robot? Is
Yeah,
that possible?
I think that should be possible. Our sister company, the Robotics AI Institute, the Ray Institute, they've proven that robots can throw and catch objects like that.
And can they do it multiple objects at a time? Like juggling? Do you think that's possible?
I've not seen that. I've seen robots play ping pong, which seems like a very hard problem, and they're getting very good at that. So I think if you wanted to do one specific thing, these tasks are all feasible. But what you're really trying to do, and you brought this up earlier, is this generality, right? That a robot can do all kinds of different tasks.
Right.
Because I can throw you an object and you would catch it. I could probably throw you 2 objects and you could catch them too. All the time, all the while, I could ask you questions and you would be able to answer them.
Right.
So this multitasking and generality of different things, I can throw you a Coke can and I can throw you a football and you would be able to catch both. That might be a harder challenge for a robot.
You know why I think this is what hinges upon the psychological adoption of robotics for the general masses, because the kind of stuff that we are building now, and rightfully so, technology scales at a certain speed. For the factory owners, for the workers, for unions, for that kind of an supply chain, that's beautiful. But the minute the average Joe in his suburban home starts caring about it is when we have robots, and you see this with artificial intelligence, people are already stunned with what artificial intelligence is capable of. The minute we start seeing a physical embodied manifestation of that, that's future. That's what I grew up reading and watching. And so I think that's where people generally begin to care about this kind of stuff.
You're right, and I think we haven't had our ChatGPT moment in robotics yet, right? And I think it's a few years away. Sometimes you see on television and on YouTube that people claim that by next year we'll all have humanoid robots in our home. That is certainly not going to be the case, right? These machines are too expensive and too dangerous for that. Our hypothesis is that today we're in this industrial area of robotics, right? Industrial area because we have purpose-built robots that do one thing very well, right? Our truck unloading robot is very good at that one particular job. Our industrial inspection robot is very good and better at a human at that one particular job. But the next phase before we go march into people's homes is probably the service era, where there's still an operator nearby, and maybe one operator takes care of 50 robots, but somewhere there's an operator nearby. Maybe the environments are a little bit more structured because maybe it's a shopping mall, maybe it's a hotel, maybe it's a restaurant. So these environments are not 100% unstructured. There's a little bit more structure, but we're getting much closer to the end consumer. So the consumer will start to interact with autonomous mobile robots in the next 5 years. As a matter of fact, in Asia, that's already the case. If I step out of the airplane in Incheon Airport in South Korea, there's immediately 2 robots that greet me and want to carry my luggage, right? And so that service era is already there in Asia, and I think that's going to come to the rest of the world very fast. And once we've mastered that, we're a little bit closer to the humans. We have less operators per robot. I think then we've earned the right to walk into people's homes and live among us.
I had a black pill moment. You know what black pill means in the internet culture?
No.
So, you know red pill, white pill?
Yeah,
So
of course.
red pill basically means I got known a truth that changed my life.
Yes.
Blue pill is I'm now conforming to reality.
Yes.
White pill is I saw something that encouraged me.
Yeah.
And then black pill is I saw something that shocked me or
Yeah.
jerked me, right?
Yeah.
And so I saw a video about Chinese robotics.
Yeah.
And as Indians, we are very fascinated by China. It's a power much closer to us than America, so we
Yeah.
keep track. And I was watching it, and it was talking about something very similar, about how we will have personalized robots in X amount of years at home,
Yeah.
this and that. And I'm sure it's easier to claim it on a video on the internet than it is to build it by a lot. I'm not rushing to say in 10 years we'll have that. But if I track back 30, 40 years, and I look at when my dad was 20, they maybe had landline phones, but the evolution of it, the curve of it, they could not have imagined in their wildest dreams we'll have screens that operate the whole universe, right? It's just such a different world. What is it? The computer on my mobile is stronger than any computer that worked in Houston that sent,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yes.
so it's such a crazy arc overall. I feel like the crazy arc is maybe 20 years away, if not 10. But we are going to walk into a future that men like yourself, women like, you guys will build that is just going to, it's fascinating. And so I'm wondering, for instance, there was a legendary problem with robotics earlier about movement, and it was kind of hard to sort of code that into graceful, smooth. I think that's pretty much solved now with what I saw with Spot. Would you say that the movement problem is now like solved in robotics, that we've figured out how to do that right?
I think it's largely solved. The reliability, of course, of the hardware will take a couple of generations to get to the reliability of, for example, a car. But if you see the latest videos of our Atlas robot, and I'm sure we'll send you some so that we can show these now. But the latest movements there is we put a human in a motion capture suit, just like we would do in Hollywood.
Right.
We capture the human's movement, we turn that into an animation, and then we do a physics-based simulation where we say, hey, reinforcement learning model, try to make the robot move as closely to the animation as possible, and then we can upload that onto the robot as a new movement policy, and the behaviors are crazy natural.
Wow.
And so I think it's largely solved. What's also fascinating, it used to take us about 2 months for one of these new policies to come alive on a robot. It now takes us 48 hours.
Wow.
The speed of innovation, because of the advances in computing power, AI, and reinforcement learning models, is so fast that, yes, I think that's largely solved.
What are the problems that remain? And I think these would be the 3 large verticals. It would be perception, dexterity, and learning. I think, what are the problems that remain in perception?
So I think we can put enough sensors on a robot that the robot sees more of the world than we do. So it's really more of the semantic scene understanding, like understanding what is in the scene. You saw Spot Inside has thermal imaging cameras, has acoustic sensors. So the robot already sees
Right.
more of the world than we do. But the robot doesn't understand the world as well as you and I do yet. So I think it's more of the understanding than it is of the physical sensing of the world.
Can I ask you how do you model the concept of understanding for a robot or for a machine? Like, what does understanding mean in that context?
Well, understanding means not only understanding the world as obstacles. Hey, I shouldn't be bumping into this because there's something in the way. That's how the robotics world worked 4 years ago. But oh, this is a human. I should probably behave a little bit differently towards the human. On our Spot robot, as an example, when the robot encounters an innate object like a forklift or a piece of machinery, the robot goes very closely to that piece of object in order to avoid it. But when the robot recognizes, oh, here's a human, you know what? I'm going to make a wider turn around that human so as to give the human a little bit more space. And so that's the difference between,
Seeing and understanding.
Yes.
So you would have to train it over a lot of data, camera data, visual data of humans walking around for it to have patterns of that. And then you would have to tell it that this is a human and this is how you behave around it. And then that would work. So like, my question here really is it trained on a lot of data to understand what to do? Or is there something else to it too?
We use a combination of both classic controls software as well as reinforcement learning to help the robot understand certain scenes and then, of course, behave differently in certain scenes. Yeah.
What about dexterity? Can it hold, manage, manipulate objects in a similar way or a better way as humans?
So dexterity is sort of the last frontier or the final frontier of robotics at the moment for us. Our Spot robot can open doors, handle smaller objects. The robot has a single arm gripper. But of course, evolution has shown us that two hands are really very handy if you want to manipulate the world. Right?
Yeah.
And so our Atlas robots does in fact have has two arms for manipulation and has much more dexterity in its hands, but it has by no means the dexterity yet that you and I have, or the fact that an 8-year-old child has. But that's something that we're working feverishly towards. We're working on it with some partners. And so I think that over the next 3 years, we'll make dramatic breakthroughs there. And we're starting with bigger objects that are heavier because we think there we can provide more value.
Yeah.
If we can pick up smaller objects, humans can do that quite well as well.
Right.
But what can we find that's super repetitive and that's very heavy? And the thing that we've identified is for Hyundai, the South Korean car manufacturer, is an internal process that is called part sequencing or kitting, where incoming parts from logistics need to be taken out of one rack and placed into another rack that gets then pushed down to the manufacturing line. Some of these parts are very heavy, 20, 30 kilograms. And if you have to do that all day, it's a horrible job. So that's the first task that we're trying to automate with our Atlas robot.
Got it. It must bring a certain sense of wonder how magical the human machinery is in that way, where an 8-year-old has the kind of dexterity that we cannot still design even if we tried with all the intellectual capital in the world, right? And you know why I wonder? The hand is it's a magical, tricky object in the tech territory. Famously, the stable diffusions generators could not find how to do hands properly. And the opposable thumb is a very interesting point in evolution because this is where all touching, picking, manipulation of objects begins, and a long arms race of intelligence begins. Humans get this intelligent directly consequential of this. And so I wonder, because you're designing arms, which is arms are going to manipulate reality for these robots in whatever way. Have you found a better design for that, or is this still the best one?
So it's unclear a little bit. Certainly, there's a lot of robotics companies that are shooting for the full anthropomorphic 5-fingered hand. The problem is at the moment that can you be strong enough to pick up heavy parts and not rip your limbs out? Because you would have to put actuators in each of the fingers, or you have an actuator in the top and you have sort of wires or something else that goes down to the hand. So I think it's a question of what is the task that you actually want to do, and is the hand and gripper that you're designing good enough? Look, in 20 years from now, that won't be a problem anymore. But we're trying to provide value with our robots today and next year and the year after. So I think the evolution will sort of come along with us. But at the moment, we're trying to pick up very heavy parts in a car manufacturing environment. And so we're building a gripper that is custom for that.
Very interesting. I have one more question. Again, feel free to speculate. I know these questions don't have a direct answer. But have you found that... So, the Spot famously looks like a dog. Let's just put it like that. The Atlas looks like a human. Is there some kind of efficiency to that morphology? Or would 5 legs be better? Or is the 8 legs of a spider better? Or should I have 3 arms? Because you see, nature evolves and designs in symmetry. It has this kind of constraint to it where my left and my right should look the same. You're not bound by that whatsoever. You can have a cyclops, you can have a uni-arm Spot dog. And so I'm wondering, have you wondered about questions of morphology and if there's a more efficient morphology to functioning?
For sure, and that's how we ended up with our stretch robot, which is not at all anthropomorphic, right?
Yep.
It is a custom robot that is built for logistics with 16-hour battery life, a very stable base, a gripper that can pick up 50-pound packages. So here's a robot that is not anthropomorphic at all. However, why we often get asked the question, okay, why build a humanoid robot? Other than the fact that I'm a huge Star Wars fan and love C-3PO,
right.
The real answer is that this world around us was built for this form factor.
Right.
And so if you want to bring automation without fixed infrastructure, this is a good form factor. Because I can go into a 50-year-old factory with a humanoid robot and can automate that factory without bolting anything new to the ground. And so that's why the human form factor is so relevant.
Got it. Maybe it's already happening. It's not popular enough for us to know, because we were discussing how this artificial intelligence end of the LLM spectrum, or now agentic system, all of this stuff on the software side is abstracted information. This is embodied intelligence. And us normies outside, we're all sitting and wondering, when do they fuse in a way where I can have, learning can become so much faster if there is ability for data to be captured, absorbed, processed, and then, iterated upon. So my question is, when do we see a popular synthesis of artificial intelligence as we are seeing it now over the next 5 years will only ramp up? It's not going to stop, and you guys are not going to stop. When does that merger happen? And what does that mean for the learning problem as far as robots are concerned?
Well, I think the next 5 is, in fact, a super interesting time for robotics. I think that by the end of this decade, many of us will have come in contact with autonomous mobile robots, autonomous legged robots. And I think that will be a very interesting time for humanity. I don't think that these anthropomorphic humanoids will walk into our daily homes in the next couple of years. But I do think that there's other form factors that are very well suited for the home. Maybe it's smaller humanoids, maybe it's cute and cuddly dog-like creatures that can live with us. Because I think in order to be welcomed into the home, we need to provide some value in the home. And before humanoids can unload your dishwasher, I think it's going to be a couple of years. And so what can we provide in the home today that would allow a robot to be welcomed into the home? Personally, I think that loneliness is one of those values. Because there's a loneliness epidemic in the in the mega metropolis cities, right? In Mumbai, in Shanghai, in Seoul, there's a lot of lonely people. Many of them can't have pets or are not allowed to have pets. And so could you create a robot that can help them with their loneliness and provide an emotional bond? I think that that's going to be possible in the near future. And I think that might be the first robot that's allowed in people's homes.
So you're saying that the first point of real contact that people outside will have with robots might be an emotional sort of lacuna that the robots are filling?
I think so.
Wow, that'd be crazy. Yeah.
Of course, people already have autonomous vacuum cleaner robots in the house, so that's sort of
it's already done.
That's already done. Or some people have autonomous lawn mowing robots. But really, a robot that autonomously sort of lives with you, right, is going to be that kind of robot.
Right. From somebody who's pretty much looking over the cliff of the cutting edge of robotics, what excites you the most about these intelligent machines?
Well, if we succeed and we can build a general purpose humanoid robot by the end of this decade, it means that in some countries manual labor might become optional and might become a choice. And that also means that we can do crazy, audacious urban planning projects. Maybe we can build beautiful monuments. I'm always surprised that if I go to Tuscany and you see the landscape in Tuscany, you're reminded that in the Renaissance, the Medici and other noble families literally moved mountains to make the landscape nicer. So could you deploy hundreds of robots to
Flatten a mountain.
to make the mountain more beautiful,
Right.
or create that we all have Zen gardens at home, or clean up the garbage on the side of the road, right? So I think there's amazing, audacious projects that we could do if manual labor became, in essence, free.
And you're not worried about the sort of, because I'm sure you get asked this question, I'm sure you think about it. I know it's a little tricky because you're in the business of robots, but don't you ever wonder about what it's going to do to sort of human work? Will it change it in a way where, because where I come from, India, a large part of India depends on manual labor for its work. And I see this happening in the US as well. Like if you look at the political discourse now, they're all talking about wanting jobs that have been outsourced to other countries. It's happening in Europe as well. China famously has factory farms where people work. And so if I just take into account the US, Russia, China, and India, that's like 3/4 of the world population, and there's a significant dependence upon manual labor. Is that not a cause of concern for you?
So let me answer on the macroeconomic level, and then on the microeconomic level what we are witnessing. On the macroeconomic level, the Economist recently did a study where they found that countries with the highest robotic adoption have the lowest unemployment rate. So at the macroeconomic level, there seems to be a strong argument for robotic adoption. And then if you look at the company level, companies that have deployed more robots tend to be more productive, which means that they're growing faster, which means that they're hiring more people because they're growing faster. And certainly all the folks that I'm currently talking to in logistics and in warehousing, these are jobs that nobody wants. In logistics, many of the companies have 120% turnover, which means they hire 5 people on a Friday, they do the job for 2 days, and on Monday only 2 of them show up because it is backbreaking work that nobody wants to do anymore. So we're not taking anybody's job away that people want. We're automating those tasks that are dull, dirty, and dangerous, and that humans don't want to do anymore. And on our personal level, we've also seen that every robot sort of creates new jobs as well. Not only, of course, here at Boston Dynamics, we're a fast-growing company, but we've noticed that in our industrial companies that have spot deployments, there's usually a team that's now in charge of the robots. And there's a new job that's called robot wrangler or robot operator that didn't exist before. Or in logistics, we see that when our stretch robots are deployed, there's more humans that stay longer because they enjoy working with the robots. So, of course, I'm not suggesting that there's no job displacement, but I think new jobs will be created as much as old jobs will go away.
No, I mean, look, I feel like the future is so far complex, and you can make endless arguments about this debate. This is going to be the debate of the decade, by the way. I think for the next 10 years, we will debate this and we will watch this play out, not just in the physical labor sense of the word. We'll see this in coding, we'll see this in art, we'll see this with musicians. I was recently in LA, and every artist or creative I spoke to is worried about what LLMs are going to do to it. You can make music that sounds better than the original artist at this point. So, this is a pervasive phenomena, and we're going to be discussing a lot of this into the future, right? I agree. But in the short run, that displacement will hit hard, and I thought initially it will hit hard countries like mine, where we are so dependent upon labor. But it seems like the charging up of even the European and the American discourse right now around labor rights and around having blue-collar jobs back is so profound. I wonder if you worry about regulatory pressures at all, because that's an existential threat at that point. Do you think about that? Is that cause of concern in the robotics sphere?
We do think about that, and we have a lot of internal discourse around it. I think that robotics are actually an opportunity to do reshoring, right? We might be able to bring manufacturing back to the United States in a way that is not possible without robots.
You may have a very good point with that, because it is probably economically not possible without robots. The cost of labor is too high in the United States for a lot of companies to consider that kind of stuff. That's a smart angle. What scares you about these intelligent machines? What is the most scared you are about them? You're a fan of science fiction. You get what I'm talking about.
I'm not scared.
No?
I love everything about these machines. I think we can provide value in amazing ways. We can keep humans out of harm's way in ways that were previously unheard of, and we can probably unlock jobs that are simply not possible. Undersea mining, space exploration, things that humans shouldn't be doing. We can do this with these machines.
No, I believe that. There is a hardware resilience to them that completely, like, my body is my life. If my body is burnt, destroyed, diseased, or broken, I cannot do it. But for a robot, one, not only can it do that kind of stuff and probably handle its aluminum, titanium body right, but also it's replaceable. It's a machinery that's put together. It's not life in all its glory and beauty and complexity. And so that part I do understand. But I mean, is there no safety concerns whatsoever? Like when I'm sitting in an autonomous driving vehicle, are there no safety concerns at the edges? I don't mean just form factors that you're working on. I'm talking about broader robotics as a field. Because this is also going to be the debate of the decade in your field. How safe are these? How do we build trust around these? Sure, I can be exposed to it, but what about the cases on the edges and the exceptions? You know how sitting in an airplane is much more scarier than being driven around in a car, even though there are more car accidents than airplane crashes? It's because there's loss of autonomy on the individual side. You see where I'm going with this question?
I think I feel more safe in an airplane because I have spent the last 30 years in Boston, and Boston drivers are notoriously interesting drivers, I would say.
Right.
But as far as the robots go, we are a very conservative organization. So you see sometimes some of our Chinese competitors having humanoid robots that are very close to humans, very close to children, very close to untrained operators. We think that that's probably a mistake, and we're much more conservative when it comes to that. So knock on wood, we have not had a safety incident here, and we hope not to have one.
For sure. I also feel like technologists specifically, and I know you're from the strategy side, but you're effectively a technologist if you work in a cutting edge company like this. I feel like they often don't realize how the cat is out of the bag. Like if you do X and you can be super ethical about it, there is somebody doing X plus somewhere that's kind of like on the edge. And I'm sure you encounter that with your Chinese counterparts all the time. Like, are there any ethical concerns in the global sphere of robotics that you see as a conservative company that others should not do?
Well, we have an anti-weaponization stance. So we published and signed a letter a couple of years ago that we would not weaponize our robots nor allow any of our customers or partners to weaponize our robots. And a bunch of other robotics companies co-signed this letter with us. And so I feel pretty strongly about that. I think the industry is not quite there yet, but I'm sure that somewhere in the world there's folks doing that, and I think that that's a mistake because it will erode the trust in these machines that in such an early phase where that shouldn't be the case.
Have you read or seen the Dune series?
The sci-fi? Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's an interesting decision tree thing in that where they decide to do away with machinery in a certain way, computers specifically. And I'm not a fan of that. I don't think you should be anti-technology. I think technology is a one-way street. But interesting idea, because if there was trust eroded to that extent, that's where people would go. Interesting. Forget the ethical part, because the ethical part we can dwell over. There's so many ifs and buts, and that's a long conversation. Paint me the beautiful parts. Say we are 10 years from today. How have these robots integrated into society? Paint me a picture. I walk out, I'm driving around Boston. Where do I see these robots?
Yeah.
Or do I not see them? Are they in policy? Are they in government? Are they in police stations?
Yeah. So I think in 10 years from now, you will certainly come in contact with autonomous robots in a variety of different areas. You will have experienced them in school, you have experienced them in universities, you will see them in service type of environments, restaurants, hospitality, hotels, concierge robots. So you will encounter them in service and hospitality for sure. And of course, also food delivery. There will be delivery robots, last mile robots, something we're working on with the Spot robot, for example. You know, it's easy for the truck to get fairly close to your house. It's very difficult for the truck to drive actually to your door and deliver the package. So that currently has to be done by a human. So last mile delivery is going to be a thing. Autonomous robots are going to drive us around as they already do. The Waymo robots are live in many American cities. That will only expand. Hopefully by then we'll have some flying stuff. Please, God.
What kind of flying stuff are we talking about?
Well, I think, you know, we've been talking about flying cars for quite some time. Obviously, it will be sort of multi-quad copters that are electric that will probably go from one station to another before they go from my house to your house.
Right.
But I do think in that 10-year time period, we'll have them in those countries that are forward-thinking enough to allow the regulation to do so. Right? And then ultimately, like I said, I do think we'll have companion robots at home in 10 years for sure. And our next generation of young kids will grow up with robots around them.
Do you think we'll also see robots in, like for instance, this one I think is part of the fire department? Was it part of the fire department? So will we see them in public service?
Yeah, for sure. We do have a couple of hundred robots with first responders today. So fire departments could use them to inspect buildings that, burnt out buildings that are too dangerous for humans to go into because they might collapse. Or police department could use the robot in hostage situations where if you don't use a robot, you have two very nervous humans interacting with each other, and that usually doesn't de-escalate the situation. Or you could also envision the robot in nuclear decommissioning, where there's highly radioactive environments that cannot be touched by humans, no matter how much PPE equipment they're wearing. So I have high hopes for our robots in those type of environments as well.
And what about, like, I'm sure also there's a lot of exploratory possibilities with this stuff that we could not have otherwise gotten to ourselves. Volcanoes famously, right? Like deep ocean situations, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that part of the range of things that we might see? Is that part of what you guys think about here or not?
Absolutely. If it's a dangerous situation that a human shouldn't be in but needs to be fixed somehow, I think our robots would always be a great solution for that.
Interesting. What will work look like for me?
What?
Work look like for me?
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand 10 years from now. It's a very central question. I walk into work. What does it look like for me? I'm in a factory, or let's say I'm in a regular corporate office. Choose whichever of the two. What does work look like for me in 10 years?
Well, I was surprised, I think, as we all were, that if you would have asked many of us 5 years ago, what jobs are going to be automated by AI first, I don't think any of us would have said creative jobs. As a matter of fact, my daughter started college 4 years ago, and she asked me, and I said, well, probably creative jobs will go last. And man, was I wrong, right? Creative jobs were some of the first things that
disappeared.
Large language models are really good at.
Yep.
Now, I don't think any creative jobs have disappeared, but they're certainly changing dramatically and are allowing artists to explore and maybe make it easier to explore totally different ways to have human-robot interaction. So I'm not sure. I don't think I can predict white-collar jobs near into the future. I do think that hard labor type jobs in manufacturing, in process manufacturing, and in logistics we will be able to automate specific tasks in those environments so that humans don't have to break their backs anymore.
So is the important skill being able to manipulate a robot over a screen and a controller like I was doing? Does that become the alpha in education? because okay, here's the thing. I'll paint you a science fiction sort of outcome. Tell me how much of it makes sense. I feel like in 10 years you're also going to find a way to integrate this with natural language understanding of some nature, but I can talk to it, and maybe it'll take static instructions at first, but then eventually understand sentence flow, etc. as well. And so, is at that point verbal prompting or textual prompting something that is what I do at work, or is it controlling it with a remote control, or is it just monitoring it over 10 different screens, watching 10 different robots do 10 different things at the same time? Like, what's a good imagination outcome of that kind of thing?
I think over the next 10 years, they will certainly be 100% autonomous. Most of these robots, you will give them a task, maybe at the beginning of the day, maybe at the beginning of the week or month, and they will autonomously execute that task. And if you need to change the mission, then yes, absolutely, you can talk to them and give them verbal commands, and they will do new behaviors. One of the things that all the robotics companies, including us, are feverishly working on is this generality, right? Teaching the robot something new by showing the robot what to do. Hey, let me show you what to do. Again, very easy for you and I to do. I can say, hey, can you pick up this camera and place it over there? That's easy for you to do. That's still a hard robotics problem on a couple of different levels, but we will get there in that time period for sure. So yes, there will be high degree of autonomy and easy to work interfaces. So remote controlling the robot might be a niche application that you might want to do. For example, if you have an offshore oil rig and something is broken, an expert could teleoperate a robot and basically teleport onto the oil platform, take over the robot and do the repairs because he's an expert in that particular field. Or in a nuclear decommissioning or nuclear disaster environment, some expert could teleoperate a robot in that environment. So I think there will always be niche applications, but I think mostly we will be fully autonomous.
I think one of those sort of exponential chat GPT-like moments for robotics might be the kind where if I'm able to show it a YouTube video and it understands what I've shown it, say I show it a recipe for the pasta that I like, and then it has automatically learned it. At that point, the cat's run out of the bag too far, right?
Yes.
And do you think that's possible?
So my marketing team is dreaming about this actually, that wouldn't it be fun if we recorded the specific movements and behaviors of the top's world best chefs and then have the robot execute their recipes with their mannerisms and with their behaviors and their voice. Would be kind of super funny. Right. So yes, I think absolutely that's going to be possible.
There are sort of three differences that still keep machines from feeling like humans completely. That's emotion, empathy, and autonomy, agency. And agency in the sense where it's not only that I can go solve a problem, but I've anticipated a problem before that problem's occurred and I've gone and solved it. How far are we from something of that nature in this field?
Well, I think what's so funny is that it will be very hard to tell, right? Because if you ask a large foundational model today, how do you feel? It doesn't say, I'm a large foundational model, I don't have feelings. It will actually respond with something that, is
akin to the fact
is
that
a hint to the fact, yeah. And sometimes they, of course, even say, no, I totally have feelings, right? I feel happy and sad today. So don't you think it will be hard to tell the difference? I was thinking about that last night. When everybody's chasing general artificial intelligence, and at what point will we know that it has occurred? And if it has occurred, will we actually know, or will that model hide that fact from us? I don't know.
What about like the status of it in that they're not going to be legally akin to humans, right? Robots probably will not have the same moral rights as humans do. But do you think 20 years, 30 years in the future, we can imagine a world where they have some legal rights and some moral status? Do you think that's possible? Or is it going to be a machine in service of humanity always? It's a speculative question.
Certainly here at Boston Dynamics, we think of them as power tools. The way that carpenters today wouldn't think of using a hand drill and you and I wouldn't think of washing our clothes without a washing machine. We think of these robots as power tools today. So I don't see a world at the moment where where robot rights in the way that humans have rights would be a thing. But who knows?
Look, it's kind of my job to ask these questions. I know sometimes these questions are kind of like fantastic and science fi oriented, but I feel like at this point, it's there are some unavoidable one-way roads that we're on, and it's all so exciting and also interesting and also uncertain. People wonder about these questions when the general population sits down and thinks about robots. They anthropomorphize the idea, the concept, and these sort of questions emerge. But that's all the questions I have. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I think that was you asked some super insightful questions, and we do realize that people think about that this way. It doesn't help that the fictional narrative in North America and Europe is so dark. That's not the case in Asia, right? People are generally excited about robots in Asia, and so that's probably not a surprise that we're majority owned by a South Korean car manufacturer. So we here at Boston Dynamics are very excited about these robots. We see the future very positive. We think that these robots help humanity and keep humans out of harm's way. So I appreciate those insightful questions, and I appreciate you coming to visit us in Boston.
Thank you. I think I've enjoyed almost everything I've seen here. You guys are doing fantastic work, and hopefully I'll see you again very soon, and we'll have another chat with like more advanced stuff around us. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.